Hello, and welcome to this 15th session of Thoughts of a Whole Brain Man. Um, I have no idea if this is going to be short, long, or longer, um, but the subject is vast. And this one is about autism and my personal experience of being autistic. And it's been prompted by the latest documentaries of Chris Packham, which are brilliant, and also a conversation I had with someone after watching one of those that video set, and they said, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool if you could capture this and share it?" So here I am, capturing it and sharing it. I guess the place to start really would be to tell you about my autistic journey. I was part of a collective group of therapists who were creating a well-being clinic in a market town in Wiltshire called Marlborough. And I wasn't necessarily getting on well with a couple of the people. And so there was some kind of issue, but I'd never really understood what it was. And one of the people involved in this, I popped in to see them one afternoon, just sit and have a cuppa. And they said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure." And they said, "Are you highly intelligent?" "Remarkably so." I had no idea how to answer that. So I said, "I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. Compared to what or whom and what measuring system?" And they asked them more questions. And at the end of these questions said, "I think you might be Asperger's syndrome." I'd heard of it. I'd heard the term before, but I didn't quite know what it was. Fast forward a year later, and I went to my GP and said, "It's been suggested by a friend who was a psychiatric nurse that I might be Asperger's syndrome," and he laughed at me. Said, "You should see the autistic children I have. You're nothing like them." But the idea persisted, and the sense that there could be something in it persisted with me as well. And so my ex-wife at the time went to that surgery but saw a different doctor. It said, "Did you know Dr. So-and-so is also a homeopath?" "No, I didn't know that," because that suggests that he's not just fixed inside the rigidity of the NHS, that he's a bit exploratory in his thinking, you know. So I went back to see him for a second opinion and said, "It's been considered I might be Asperger's." He said, "Well, let's find out." So I got referred to a place called the Priory in Bristol. And this chap asked me questions about my life, history, background, things to answer the questions. And he said, "Well, you are Asperger's syndrome." And he said, "I think it's mostly nurtured." Because of my background. My background is that I was a twin. My twin brother died when we were 4 days old. My mum became seriously ill when I was 10. When she had her third heart attack when I was 10, she also had a stroke at the same time, became paralyzed down the left-hand side. My dad, to keep make ends meet, started to do double shifts in a factory. So he was working from 6 till 2 and then immediately from 2 till 10. So that meant that I would wake up in the morning and I'm my mum's carer. So I had to, at the age of 10, get myself washed and dressed, motivated to go to school. I liked school, so that was all right. And then go downstairs. My mum was sleeping downstairs at that time. So, because she couldn't get upstairs, obviously. And so I would blanket part with my mum, which is tricky when you're a 10-year-old boy. And then the trickiest bit, I guess, was getting her on a commode, which is like a portable toilet. It's like a chair with a potty bucket in the middle of it. and it wobbles, this thing. Of course, I'm only about waist high to my mum, and she was paralyzed from the waist down. So I'd get her on the edge of the bed with her feet just hovering above the floor, and then grab her hands and then swing her up like that. And she would wobble like this, and then try and guess the right moment to have her come down. And hopefully, her hips would go between the handles of the commode, and she'd sit without it going do, 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 do. And then she'd go to the toilet, so I'd have to stand and listen, and yeah. And then help her to kind of half stand and help her to clean. This is your mum in the morning, you know. And then lift the all out of there, and she'd be wobbling like this, and then kind of swinging her down so she hits the bed, and then help her get in and help her put pajamas on. And then I'd go and make a tea, make some breakfast, and put that on a tray for her, and then administer high-powered drugs like Tunil and phenobarbital and things like this. These Valium, these words stuck in my brain, you know. And then I'd go off to school, and quite often I'd come home because I didn't live too far away from the school. I'd come home lunchtime to see how she is. And in the spring, summer months of 73, she would attempt to have a go at walking on her own. And so I'd find her in the kitchen with a head cracked open and blowing on the floor and things. So I'd ring my dad at the factory, and I'd ring an ambulance, and whoever arrived first would take over, and I'd go back to school. This obviously had an impact on my education. It had an impact on me generally as well. My mum had another heart attack and a stroke at the same time on bonfire night. It was 1973. She went into a coma, and she was in hospital till about February, March time. But the version of it that came out then was a very much changed person. So I spent a lot of my school holidays around the age of 12, 13, 14, accompanying her to physiotherapy things. And that meant having a ride on the ambulance. That was exciting. And while she was having a physio, I would fetch and carry cups of tea for the patients in the outpatients. So I'd hang out with tall people in pajamas and dressing gowns with various stages and various types of brain damage. And I got used to being around it. I got a little bit knowledgeable. At the time, you could ask me questions about strokes and things, and I would rattle off loads of information, but I got lost for a while. But it did certainly kind of have been like the beginning of an interest, you know, especially that my mum's voice changed, the sound of her voice, and not just the sound of her voice or her slurred speech and the ability to say with consonants completely, but also her vocabulary changed as well. I think because she couldn't make the sounds of words, she tended to err towards words that she could say. So that had an effect on her vocabulary, which had an effect on articulation and conversation and all sorts of things. It was almost like she changed. Her temperament had changed a bit as well. It kind of dipped for a bit, and it re-emerged again in 1981. Yeah, my dad was semi-disabled as well. He took early retirement so he could look after her full time, and he became the template for what love is for me. You know, you look after someone you love, whether they've got a physical ailment or a mental one or both, and you're there for them until, you know, the time is done. So, yes, now to say that all of that was responsible for my autism, I think misses something. As you know, I'm an astrologer, and when in one class we were looking at the astrology of our birth moment, I noticed that there was something in my birth chart that suggested that I could have had a problem with breathing. and there could have been an oxygen deficiency at the moment of birth, and that could have contributed to a change or a damage in my cognition. Another person in the class had an autistic son with exactly the same patterning, and they had an oxygen problem at birth. So that does, to me, suggest that there was some nature going on as well. It wasn't all my parents' fault, as it were, which that man had led me to believe, which caused me an issue, you know. So I found another lens, as it were. So my mum, I can remember vaguely my mum talking to someone and a neighbour saying he might be special. My mum, I think, was in a bit of denial or a desire for me to not be autistic in the years before she got ill. Once she got ill, then all attention just revolved around my mum's illness. And so no matter what you were doing, if you weren't ill, you weren't being looked at. Yes, so I was an undiagnosed autistic person from my childhood. My mum died when I was 19. A year later, my dad abandoned me. So I suddenly found myself, and I got made redundant from the only job I'd had as well. So my dog died. So within 1 year, my mum died, my dad died, my dog died. I got made redundant from the job I was in, and I was stuck. I had no qualifications because I left school early to earn money for the family, you know. I had no qualifications, no skills, autistic but no diagnosis, and yeah, and in a council flat that I couldn't pay the rent for because it's in my dad's name, but he wasn't paying the rent, and I didn't know where he was. He just vanished. So that was a bit of a tricky time, and I somehow managed to survive. And So fast forward to 1999, and this person suggested that I might be Asperger's syndrome. I looked into it a bit, but the internet was new to me then, so I didn't really know how to research. But the year that I got my diagnosis in 2002, around the spring of 2002, I was 40. There was also an advertisement in a journal, an astrology journal, advertising the first degree or master's degree with astrology as its topic in a British university for 400 years. And my ex-wife said, "You got to do it." I said, I can't do that. I haven't even got an A level. I've never done any school. I was hardly at school. I went for 2 years without even being given a report because they didn't know me well enough to even assess me on anything. All the stuff I know, I read in Children's Encyclopedia Britannica from Aardvark to Zeus, and that's the level of the extent of my knowledge, you know. So, but I'd trained in hypnotherapy by that stage, and I'd been teaching astrology for about 11 years by that stage. Yeah, I was just working it out. Yes. So, I thought, okay, I'll give it a go. So I rang the university and talked very nicely to the receptionist who put me through to the professor who's going to be head running the department. And I spoke very nicely to him, and he said he invited me for an interview. So I drove to this campus at Bath Spa, and I got lost. This is all relevant, by the way. I got lost. I was an hour late. So eventually I found the room where this very patient professor was waiting, and we were talking, and it transpired that the people who had signed up for this course so far, the return of astrology to academia in the astrological world is a huge, huge historic event. These students were the people on my bookshelves, authors like Liz Green, Bernadette Brady, right? And there's me. And I was asked, have you published any books? No. All I've done is produce some course material. And I showed him the course material. But we got chatting, and we seemed to hit it off. So he said, I'm going to give you a chance. Right. So I did a master's degree from a standing start with no prior education. And at the end of it, I got a distinction for my dissertation. And about 3 years later, I saw an advertisement for a master's degree of science degree for therapists who don't have a psychology degree. That's how it's advertised. It was a Master of Science in Psychosocial Studies at University West of England. So I applied for it and I told them how I'd used the NLP stuff that I use on myself. And they said, all right, it's a bit esoteric, but we'll give you a go. And I got a distinction for the dissertation and a distinction for degree overall, which I'm really, really proud about, you know. So my reason for mentioning these university things is that universities have support, student support. So when I went to Bath, I got kind of slipped through the net. I wasn't picked up on. And it wasn't until I was writing the first papers that I even found out there was such a thing as student support. So I went along and they said, oh, we've got to do an assessment. So I went to Southampton and I answered lots of questions. And they said, well, you're definitely Asperger's syndrome. And they said, one of the things that we note is that you have a propensity for self-correcting. And I said, right, what do you mean? Because to me, that sounded like self-correcting. I understood that as self-chastising or self-criticizing, you know, telling yourself, ah, you've done that wrong, you idiot. You've done that wrong. You need to do it like this. Turned out that's not what they meant at all. Imagine that you're writing a paragraph. Say you're going to post something on a social media thing or send a text message. So you write your 4 sentences, right? And you look at it and there are no typos at all. And you send off your pristine piece of writing and go off and make a cup of tea. And then when you come back and you look at what you've sent, suddenly, glaring, there are typos. You couldn't see them first time. They weren't there. But now you're looking at it, you can't miss them. How come you didn't see them first time? So what my brain does on an internal level is that I look at what I'm typing and I correct it internally in my head. Because what I'm reading isn't what I've actually typed. What I'm reading is my memory of my intention of what I wanted to type. Yeah. So I go tippity type, tippity type, tippity type. And what's on my screen, I'm not looking at what's physically there. I'm looking at like a superimposed vision of the memory of my intention. It's only if I shake the memory out of my head. So if I change my attention, go off and make a cup of tea and come back, and I've been thinking about that and this and this and the hot water and that, those things are enough to kind of cause like a fragmentation of the memory. So now when I look at what I've written, I actually see what's there. So I thought, oh, so I put a thing on Facebook at the time saying, dyslexic friends, do you ever find that you can't see your own typos, but you can see other people's? And a load of dyslexic people said, yeah, I can see other people's, but I'm not supposed to be able to, because dyslexics are told that we can't see typos. No one's ever looked at it and said, it's their own that they can't see, but they can see other people's, which means we can see typos. So why can't we see our own? And that's because we still retaining the memory of what we wanted to write. So there's self-correcting taking place. So it's not that we can't see typos. It's that we're prone to self-correcting. Now, I've noticed that a similar thing happens. I have to say this. One of the things I have to do in life is have a cleaner come to my house once a month. And that might think, oh, that's very grand, you've got a cleaner or whatever. No, it's actually something I can't do. And part of the reason is that what comes packaged with my autism is dyspraxia. So I have a motor coordination issue. And if I'm trying to clean things, I break things and cut myself and stuff like that. So it's just easier for someone else to do it. Another thing as well uh, is that I was going to say something. What was it? Yes. Imagine that there's a TV screen, right, in the room. The TV's switched off and it's covered in dust. Right? I can look at a television that's covered in dust and not see the dust because I'm looking for the television. So I switch the TV on, I still can't see the dust, even though the dust is illuminated. But if I'm looking for dust, then I can see the dust, but I can't see the television. So I have this odd thing that I only see where I place the eye of my attention. So if I'm walking down the street and I'm not thinking, I bet Jeff walks around the corner in a minute. Jeff can walk around the corner. I literally won't see him because I'm not looking for him. That kind of thing happens where somebody once, my ex-wife booked a surprise holiday a weekend away in Vienna for my 40th birthday. And it was all a big surprise and things. And so one morning I got the post, Saturday post, and I carried it upstairs and gave her the post. And she got in a fluster saying, well, the secret's out. You know where we're going. Said, what do you mean? So, well, you gave me the post. Yeah. Well, there's a postmark on the envelope. Is there? And she couldn't understand how I didn't see it. I must have looked at it, but I didn't see it. And I used to say to people, I can't see what I'm looking at. It's just an odd thing, right? So when I was 18 in a band, I taught myself to play guitar by going to watch bands and looking at shapes of fingers and then finding like a triangle shape and things. And I taught myself to play. And then I had a go at auditioning for a band when I was 17. I got in. So I spent a few years hanging out around West London, playing in bands. And one time I didn't have a car, so the keyboard player was driving me home. And he had a kind of an entrepreneurial type of mind about him. And he said, some friends of mine have done a short film. Would you come over one evening and watch it? And I said, yeah, all right. Why? Because it's a bit of a trek from here to there, Hillingdon. And he said, you see what others miss, but you miss what others see. And it's the fact that you see what others miss that I want to know. I thought that was very astute, and I've remembered that for the rest of my life. I have this ability to kind of find things that are left field or off piste. Yes, it's almost like I'm looking around the corner all the time, so I don't see the main view that others do. I get this other sort of perspective, which is a boon in my work as an astrologer, because the way that I do interpretation is quite unique. There aren't that many people that have the same nuances of meaning as me. And that's largely because of the topics that I've looked at. This is called Thoughts of a Whole Brain Man because I've got a Master of Arts and a Master of Science as well, because I'm interested in the esoteric but also the practical simultaneously. My first job was working in a factory when I was 16 until I moved into these offices when I was 18. And so I was around engineers all the time. And so that kind of thinking kind of gets absorbed in. Yes. So these Chris Peckham videos recently have been brilliant. Some of the things that they've talked about were things I experienced, such as I have a heightened nervous system, so lights are bright for me. I'm in a room at the moment. I've got some uplighters on, spotlights pointing at bookcases. There's no central ceiling light. Um, I'm illuminated because I have a photographer's light box on the floor behind my desk. So the light comes around the desk rather than shining directly on me. In fact, the little bit of light you can see on my glasses lens is the illumination of the screen. So, there aren't any points of light dazzling my eyes. I'm sensitive to smells, pungencies of things, textures, softness, roughness, scratchiness, hardness. Yeah, it's all amplified, you know, which is useful in certain contexts and really inconvenient in other contexts, especially in a world where for some reason it seems very important for designers of restaurants to put speakers above the diners' tables so that the music competes with the volume level of a person's voice, so that I can't hear what people are saying because the sound is so intrusive. Likewise, ceiling lights to me are painful. When there's light kind of hitting the top of my head, I actually feel pain. It's physically uncomfortable for me to have light above me. If a light's kind of this level going down, that's fine. So I found a really nice little kind of USB rechargeable desk lamp that you can kind of lift up and have it below your eye line, but it can still illuminate the paper that you're looking at. So if I'm kind of working a bit late, I can see everything perfectly, but there's no light bouncing up into my eye. I've got a keyboard here at the moment, and I've got a strip light held or glued above it, so that the light goes down onto the keyboard, but it doesn't come up into my eyes. And I spend a lot of my time thinking about light management, you know, and also the physicality of moving around, objects in the way, that there must be through thoroughfares. I'm inclined to trip over things when there's nothing there, let alone have stuff sticking out, door handles catching my sleeves and all this sort of thing. So I have to be quite mindful of stuff like that. I'm diabetic type 2, so that also means if I get open wounds like scratches or bruises, that can take a long time to heal. And, the extreme of that is that if I get a slight cut on my foot and it wasn't attended to, I'd end up having my foot amputated, which I really don't want, you know. So, yeah, so these videos that Chris Peckham had done, one of them was about a young man who was non-verbal. Believe it or not, there was a time when I was non-verbal. When I was between when my dad had gone and the band I was in at the time, they said, we can't carry you anymore because you can't contribute towards rehearsals. So I left music, I sold my guitars to pay a bill, and I focused on humanities and psychology and esoteric things like astrology. And I reconnected with music again in the mid-90s. Where was I? Yes. So I was saying something. One of the things I have a problem with is memory sometimes. Yes, so being non-verbal. When I was about, I don't know, 24, I got into playing pool a little bit in a local pub. So I'd go in the local pub and I'd put 50p on the pool table. And the only thing I would say all night would be, it's your go, or you've got two shots. That's it. I wouldn't enter it into any conversation. I'd order a drink at the bar, and that would be it. By the time I was about 27, and I'd read so much about things like astrology and history and all sorts of stuff, that then I found that people were asking me questions, and that started me teaching. I thought, I'm getting bored answering the same questions all the time, so I'll get some people together in the same room, and they can ask me questions, and I'll answer them all at once. And that started my teaching career. But up until that point, I thought I didn't have anything to say to anybody. What do you say? How do you just walk up to a person and strike a conversation? I had no idea. So I was exceptionally isolated, you know, through regression work. I have memory of the moment that my brother was taken out of our incubator. We were in the same incubator, first of all. And on day two, we were separated, and he died on day four. And I remember it was almost like something peeling away skin from mine. That was the feeling of it. It took me a while to realize that he'd passed on as well. And that suddenly felt incredibly lonely. So, as an only child, when my mum became ill, I mentioned that all the attention was on her. So my parents were sleeping downstairs and I had the whole of this upstairs of the house to myself. So to keep me company, they got me a little black and white portable TV when I was about 12. And so I started watching late night telly, and it used to finish around midnight. But, I was falling asleep at school when I went. And then when I was 12, we went to this bigger school when there were bullies and I stopped going. This sounds awful, but once I got my mum all ready, I would go into the upstairs loo and I would chain smoke about 3 cigarettes and sniff bleach to make myself have an asthma attack. And then I'd stay home, look after my mum and play cards with my mum all day. And I did that for about 2 years. And then we moved across town into a council flat. And I went to this new school and there were kinder people, less bullies. And I liked that. So I stayed with that until I had to leave school at 16 to earn money for the family. But because I'd been put back a year because I'd missed so much, I left a year before taking any exams. So I read a lot through my 20s. When I was unemployed and unemployable, I did a variety of jobs for a day here and a couple of days there. But I read a lot. I'd just go in the local library and get books on whatever subject and read those. So, the university things. When I went to UE to do the MSc, they found we paid for a full assessment to be done. She found a few things. One was I'm dyslexic. This is in 2009. Also, I've got dyspraxia. To begin with, she said, could you write your name and address on this form? I said, sure. So I wrote my name and address. And she said, are you aware that when you handwrite, that your words are a mixture of lowercase and uppercase? I'd never spotted that before, but she was right. So I'd write, think of a word like breakfast. I'd write a capital B, a capital R, a small e, a small a, and a capital T, So I wasn't using capitals correctly. I was just randomly putting capitals and lowercase. Right? And I'd never noticed that I was doing it. There were these puzzle things like, square pegs and round holes. I was fiddling about with that for ages. She formed the conclusion that I've got dyspraxia, which is a motor coordination thing. So I was explaining to a friend of mine that sometimes if I'm peeling a potato, I'll peel my thumb instead of the potato. And he said, is that because you can't tell the difference between where the thumb ends and where the potato begins, sort of thing? I said, no, I can see them clearly. And I'm telling my brain is telling my hand, go along the potato. But my hand, when it's doing that, involuntarily jumps across and then takes the skin off my thumb, which is very tricky. I buy clothes that are self-drying or quick drying so that I don't have to iron anything. I play guitar still, but my hands do random stuff, And so in 2015, I gave myself a huge challenge of playing open mics. So I go to local pubs on open mic evenings and put my name on the list. and then play three of my own songs in front of people, knowing that my hands can do random strange things any minute. But that's part of the triumph of managing, you know. It's a little kind of my personal Olympus to do that. So I've got to remember the words, remember the notes, play in time, at least try and look like you're enjoying yourself, and control the neurology at the same time without anyone knowing that's what I'm doing. Yeah, quite a thing. Love doing that. Yeah. So she also found at the thing at UE that my brain has this strange relationship with between my input speed of learning and my output speed of expression. So we use a metaphor, yeah, that was given to me by an ex-headmistress in 1992. She said to me that if you went John O'Groats to Land's End, the average IQ across the whole country is someone who works, for example, as a checkout person in a supermarket, not as a fill-in job, but as their actual profession. Right? Whether she's right or not, I don't know, but we'll just use that little benchmark for illustrative purposes. So if you got said person, checkout person, and gave them a book that they'd never seen before, and gave me the same book, and I'd never seen it before, and you told both of us, right, begin to read, and we'll see where you are in 30 minutes. So I begin reading, they begin reading. Half an hour later, beep, we're told to stop. If the supermarket checkout person is, for example, on page 10, I'd be on page 4. So my input speed is much slower than other people's. And that's not just reading, that's any input, verbal, comprehension, listening, understanding, any input of data or input in any means. My brain comprehends it more slowly than most people's does. But if you then immediately said to me and the checkout person, now give a talk to this group of people on what you've learned, they might be able to talk for, say, 10 minutes on what they've read. I'd be able to talk for an hour. So my articulation is in the top 2%, but my input speed is below average. And that incongruence is a part of my autism. When this was told to me and explained, I said to a tutor at the time, I said, there you go, Nigel. I sound like I know a lot, but I actually don't know much at all. It's official. So I've got this ability to extrapolate, and I don't remember that much, but I think things through. And I've got an ability to think things through at quite a swift pace as well. I love books. My books are my friends. My rate of reading has slowed in the last 20 years, but I still add to the collection because for some reason I have this notion that one time I might be on a desert island and nothing is calling my attention, and I actually have time to catch up and digest and read all this wonderful knowledge and information around me. Yeah, I have a feeling that that time frame to do that has to actually be engineered rather than just per chance. Yes, I haven't managed to get to a point in life where I can do that just yet. Yes, so isolation. So I grew up an only child. When my dad abandoned me, that was incredibly hard. I left Slough, where I grew up, and I went to the south coast. I looked for places to get some work, and I ended up in Bournemouth, and I found that I could have had about 2 or 3 little jobs all at once. And so I'd settled there for about a year, around 1987. And every Sunday I'd go for a walk along the beach, rain or shine, just go for a walk. And I'd see families and couples holding hands and this sort of thing. And it was very, very lonely. I didn't know how to approach a person to speak, to chat, chat up lines. I had this feeling that everyone's dad tells them what to do, but my dad forgot because he was looking after my mum. And so I just used to look at other people in connection with one another while I'm isolated. It's like I was on the other side of a glass wall, and I just didn't know how to get through that at all. So I'd walk past people's houses and I'd look at these houses and think, how do you get a house? Because I just lived in a rented bedsit. What do you actually do? And then I'd look at buildings of office blocks and things and think, what are they doing? So someone goes into one of these buildings at 9 o'clock in the morning and then they go to a desk but what do they actually do? And I had no comprehension of what people did, you know. So I didn't know how you go from doing small tasks of action to having enough income to be able to actually have a house and a car and to be attracted for a lady who might want to share her life with you and to have children and then the responsibility of that. And it all seems so overwhelming on the one hand and yet also so far, far away. It was almost like I was walking around places, looking at other people's lives, not that necessarily that I was invisible, but I was sort of non-existent. You know, it's like I left no footprints. That's how it felt to me, you know. Since then, people say that I'm a big light in their lives, and that's such a wonderful thing. But in those days, I was quite literally totally unseen, unexperienced, unheard. And it was wretchedly lonely. And that's continued, really. When I have my main meal a day, I watch a BBC Two television programme at 6 o'clock called House of Games. It's a 30-minute quiz that's light-hearted, fun and banter and good-humoured. And so I eat while I'm watching that because it makes my body go into a good-humoured space while I'm bringing food in, and I like that. But also it means my attention is on the quiz and answering the questions and listening to the jokes, which means I'm not paying attention to the fact there's no one else there. It's like the telly is my friend, you know, because there's one time a year I find it really hard, and that's Christmas Day. Having Christmas dinner on your own, it's like sitting down at a table full of ghosts. And I find that really hard to do. So again, I'll put something on the telly. You know, I play something that I know that I like that will lift me out of the moment. Some friends of mine ran a pub for a while near Chippenham, and they said, you know, what are you doing Christmas Day? I said, I'm just on my own. And they said, come to the pub and have Christmas dinner here. We'll find you a table on your own. I said, can you hear what you're saying? Imagine that. Imagine a person who has lost all their family. They're all dead, right? And they go to a place, a building that's full of laughter and joy and of surprise and families with their in-jokes and connections and their loves and their dramas and their histories. And they're all in group units, sharing their connections and you're sitting there watching these other people enjoy their loving connections. What would that make you think? What would it make you feel? Especially if you're a vegan and all you can smell is meat, because I haven't eaten meat since 1991 and I can't stand the smell of meat. To me, meat smells as bad as cigarettes. It's ugh. I don't mind going to a curry house with friends because I can't smell the meat because of the curry smell. You know, that's all right. Occasionally, I'll go to a British food pub. That's okay, like once a year or something. But yeah, no. So anyway, the idea of being invited to Christmas dinner, I did that in 19 at the end of 91 into 92. Someone invited me to their house for the afternoon at Christmas, and I sat in a chair and I watched the mum talking to her daughter and this young lad kind of going up and down playing some kind of game on a computer. And I just sat there with their telling on, watching programs that I didn't choose without saying anything to anybody. And then after a little while, I thought, okay, well, I'll go now. And it was just odd, you know. Uh, I had a girlfriend for a couple of years in the mid 90s, and I had a Christmas with her the first time because she had a 10-year-old daughter. So one Christmas she was on her own, the next Christmas her daughter's with her, next Christmas daughter's with dad, and it oscillated. So it turned out that our first Christmas was when she was on her own, and she came to my place, and I had a wonderful, wonderful, loving Christmas. She played guitar, I played guitar. You know, it was like a dream come to life. The next year, she was with a daughter, so I wasn't there. Yeah, tricky things. In 2014, after my marriage had ended, I hit on something. Well, one thing I found was that at the Christmas of 2014, I was on my own. So I was ringing friends to say Merry Christmas, and they're all tied up or busy or engaged, right? So the next year I thought, I know what I'll do. So I sent a thing to some friends saying, would you like to speak with me on Christmas Day, on Skype it was in those days, now it's Zoom, at these times? And I gave them a list of times from 8 a.m. right through to midnight. And people would literally book a time slot. So that way I know I definitely get to speak to you, you know. And so I paced them out through the day with a big gap in the middle for me doing my own lunch and things like this, watch any bit of telly that I want to see. And I'd spend the whole of Christmas catching up with friends. And it's brilliant, you know. And there's no thing of I missed you and you weren't there or you weren't ready, because, you know, they know I'm on my own. And if they don't attend to a time slot, they know that I'm going to be waiting. And I'm on my own at Christmas and they've not shown up. And that can be quite emotionally painful for me. Yes. So being isolated inside oneself, but also isolated in life as well. Both in internal and external isolation are some of the things that I deal with. I've got a listing here because when I had this conversation with my friend, I made some notes. In the ADHD thing that Chris did this year, Chris Beckham did, this young man talks about his idea of a tombola man, which means his memory goes random. And I have that as well. I'm sure I've got a bit of ADHD too. You know, I can be going up the stairs and suddenly think of something that I was doing in the kitchen like 3 days before and stuff like this. And it can take what seems like a very long time before I actually get round to finishing tasks or remembering to even start them. It's inconvenient to say the least. You know, I have a memory that is exceptional in certain moments. So I can remember things right way back from when I was a kid, like verbatim, you know. How happy is the moron? He doesn't give a damn. I wish I were a moron. My God, perhaps I am. I read that in 1979. It also had a little rhyme. You know the old Ring a Ring of Roses, which came from the plague. There was this update. It said, ring a neutron, a pocket full of protons, a fission, a fusion, we all fall down. I don't know how my brain remembers this stuff, but it does. And yet at the same time, I forget something that I did half an hour ago. Or some people think that my memory is, like a lot of people's, attached to value. So I remember what's important and I forget what isn't important. So if I forget to call a friend, they take it personally. And they think, oh, he didn't call me. Well, I can't be important then. But they are. It's just I've got a random memory. You know, I go and see a lot of bands still. Love watching live music. And I remember one time I had some tickets to see the Buzzcocks. I think this must have been around 20, somewhere between 2013 and 2015. And I thought, oh, that gig's coming up soon. When is that? And I looked in my little box where I keep tickets, you know, in the old ticket days. And I got the ticket and it was yesterday. So I forget things that are important to me, you know, but I also remember trivial and nonsense as well. It's completely random. It's quite bizarre. It's fascinating that I can remember stuff, but it's also really inconvenient as well. So that's a problem. One of the things that can happen, I was talking earlier about the central nervous system, the stimulus of the nervous system. I had a client once who he had Mars in Gemini, and he said he had a problem with fainting. Fainting. He said, yeah. He said, if I go to a restaurant, even though it doesn't feel hot, I pass out. I have to get up and walk out, and if I can't get up and walk out, I pass out. And I said, I know what's happening. He said, yeah. I said, yeah. What's happening is that you're experiencing a stimulus. Your nervous system is becoming stimulated. So it's the noise, the hubbub, the sounds, possibly the temperature, maybe the lights, because even little pinpoints of light stimulate your nervous system, right? So what your body wants to do is remove itself from the environment. But if your conscious mind is saying, I'm in a social situation, I don't have permission to just walk out, I have to physically stay here, then you go into like a fight inside yourself. And if you can't escape because your body wants to move, then the only thing you can do is your consciousness escapes by getting you to close your eyes and you astral project and get out of there. So on one level of consciousness or another, you leave the situation. And he found that very helpful to understand what was going on, you know. So he said, right, so I need space to breathe. Yeah, space to breathe and space to cool down as well. Yeah. So being able to understand affect regulation and dysregulation and things like homeostasis and temperature and the redressing of balance and the seeking of equilibrium in your system helps to kind of figure out whether or not you can assess if an environment is going to be conducive to peace and relaxation, or if it's going to be hectic and therefore you can't tolerate it for very long. You know, so you know, sometimes people say, oh, should we try this restaurant? And I'll go, let's have a look. And I look inside and you know, it's too bright, or there aren't any tables by the windows, or the speakers are too loud, or whatever it is, you know. Yes. So this kind of environmental relationship is quite an issue. One thing that happens in the environment to do with the expression of affect is human beings being irritated, annoyed, or angry, or any degree of that, right? So if you had a scale from 0 to 10, anything between 2 and 10, I'm hypersensitive, right? So if I'm in a supermarket and there's someone 3 aisles up and they start shouting at a child, internally I feel as if it's happening to me. I know it isn't. Intellectually, I know it's nothing to do with me. It's just a sound in the world. But my body responds as if I'm in threat of being attacked. And in 2000, I can't remember if it's 2003 or 2004, might have been 2004. One of my ex-colleagues on the MA was a 6'2" druid guy. He had Sun in Scorpio, and he was a giant of a man, right? I'm only 5'4", and I was unwrapping birthday presents, very nice. And in the middle of this, and the phone rang, and I thought, oh, it's someone saying happy birthday. So I answered it, and it was a landline phone, and it was this guy, and he said, I've really got a problem. Can you help me? And I was in the middle of this present thing, so I said, oh, what's wrong? Next thing you were on the phone for half an hour. And he said that some friends had suggested he might be Asperger's syndrome and he's freaking out about it. And at one point he said to me, how do you deal with the screaming? And I said, what do you mean? He said, when women scream at you, he said, I always collapse on the floor and put my hands over my ears in a ball. And I had the picture of this tall, strong man collapsing and doing that. And that was the first time I'd had a conversation with someone else who also doesn't know how to handle or hold or deal with the sound of aggression. I'd actually find the shouting and screaming to be more traumatic than being hit. That might sound odd, but that's how my body registers things. So even like in a thing on TV, if there's a shouty thing, I have to switch it off. Sometimes I'm curious about watching Question Time, but I have a problem if it turns into a shouting match. I have to turn the volume down, which then means I don't know what they're saying, so switch over, watch something that's calming. Yes, and I know of other people that have had this. Someone said that they had to go back to the school and talk to the teachers about the aggression in the classroom is upsetting her autistic son. And they said, oh, no, we're very careful. None of us ever express anything like that to your son. And she said, yes, I know, but you do to other children within earshot. And they didn't understand. So what? Not understanding it's the sound of aggression, not necessarily the identity of the targeted attack, if that makes sense. Yes. So, overwhelmed. Sometimes people with autism have experiences of being overwhelmed. I've heard someone call it burnout. It's not technically a burnout, it's more of an overwhelm, really, and a meltdown in a sense. So what happens is that the nervous system gets stimulated to the extent that the person can't cope. And again, they have to remove themselves from the environment. And if that's not physically possible, then they collapse inside and do their best to kind of shut off the hearing and shut off their eyes to try to stop the stimulus coming in. So I have a strange thing. If I'm in a social situation, say in one of these pubs with a big high ceiling, the noise can swirl around to the extent that I can't hear the voice of anyone next to me, but I can hear what's being said a few feet away. So what happens is my brain shuts down the loudest voices, which then means I hear the second loudest voices. So I literally can't hear the sound of someone's mouth a few inches away, but I can hear the sound of someone in the corner saying, I didn't want bread. Yeah, it's just, when I understand, oh, right, so my brain is protecting me by closing down my awareness of the loudest things, or the most impactful things, because it works the same with lights and smells and things as well. Yes, not easy to explain in a way, or rather, it's not something that most people would kind of ordinarily think about. But it's part of the experience I have. Yeah, and I'm lucky enough to be articulate enough to be able to kind of express it. Yes. Now, some people, when they are in that kind of meltdown dynamic, their affect in their system builds up to the extent that they need to kind of flicker it away. So if you've ever seen like a child with cerebral palsy, sometimes they go like that. In a sense, you're seeing body movement. In a sense, you're seeing the person dispensing or dispersing the affect in their system, almost like flicking it out. Imagine you've got this stuff inside your hand. It's inside your hand, and it's burning you. So you want to go, and flick it away, flick it off you, right? So when people have affect in their system wants to go return to equilibrium. And the way to do that is to express or disperse the affect. That can be done through a laugh or an ouch, oh, right? Bang your elbow and you go, oh, and that's got rid of some affect that way. Getting annoyed, getting angry, stamping feet. There's lots of different ways that people can kind of express affect. And some people, if they're non-verbal and they're feeling very overwhelmed and the people around them are shouting at them, then sometimes the only thing they can do is lash out because they haven't got any other option or choice. Yes, not the best thing, but sometimes it's the only thing. So when you see some of these, hidden camera documentaries of, people in a care home screaming at an autistic person who's on the floor trying to cover their head, and the frustrated care worker is shouting, "Why don't you put your shoes on?" What? If they didn't know it, what they need to do is back away, calm their voice down, give the person space to breathe, give them enough space that they can return to looking outwards, give them enough space that they can develop trust again, give them enough space that they feel safe. Safe enough to open up to you and reach out to you with an expression of their reality, which is very, very different to screaming in someone's face and shaking them. Yeah. I had a wonderful moment once. It taught me a lot about me and about teaching and interacting with people. I'm just going to adjust the lighting here because I've noticed it's got a little bit dim. Bear with me a second. I just need to adjust this. Too bright. That's better. Okay, right. I'll edit that bit. So we need some silence. Yeah, this experience was profound. I was doing teacher training at Swindon College in 1995, and on the second evening, we were told to get into pairs and tell each other what you teach. So I paired up with this lady, and I said to her, I teach astrology and neuroholistic therapy, and talked about that a little bit. And what do you teach? And she said, "Oh, I teach adults with learning difficulties life skills." Life skills? Yes. I said, "Oh, do you mean like how to apply for a job or how to open a bank account?" And she said, "No, no, more fundamental than that. We teach them how to tie their shoelaces and how to brush their teeth." And I went, "Oh, right." And then the next day, we teach them how to brush their teeth and how to tie their shoelaces. "Oh, right." And the next day, we teach them. And I was struck by this person's depth of patience. It was angelic. That these people, these workers in this particular care unit, they get up in the morning and they go to work and they see their clients and they teach them how to do simple everyday tasks with kindness and charm and a bit of a jovial twinkle, and it's exactly the same level of care every day. And there isn't any degree of impatience at all. And the reason is context. You see, they know that each of their clients, when they go to sleep that night, the sleep will act like an amnesia, right? So, like it cleans the slate, right? So when they wake up in the morning with a blank slate, they have no memory of having tied their shoes the day before. And because they have no memory of tying their shoes the day before, there's no retention. That means they have no skill retention. And because they have no skill retention, it's absolutely unrealistic to expect somebody to be able to do something that they've never encountered before. And in their world, they've never encountered it because the encounter has become erased by sleep. And these workers knew that. So they're teaching, although the person's the same body, the same name, the same voice, it's fresh teaching every day. And because they have no expectation of memory being retained, when the person can't remember it, they don't have any disappointment. Because there's no disappointment, there's no annoyance. And because there's no annoyance, there's no fizz in their system. And they're absolutely calm all the time. You know, is it that we get frustrated when someone doesn't get it? Or is it that we don't understand the reason they haven't got it? And if we understood the reason they haven't got it, we could then help them to get it. Or accept the fact that there's an issue and then just work with that. Work with the reality rather than our expectations of how we think other people should be to us. You know, goodness me, I learned so much from that 5-minute conversation. I think I think I'm quite to say I took more from that than I did from the whole course. You know, what a moment that was. It was so illuminating on so many levels. And for years, I've thought about it. And each time I revisit it, I find another nuance and another layer of something that I learned from that interaction. It was just wonderful, you know. And so my students hopefully find me to be a very easygoing, enjoyable, cheerful, hopefully witty teacher of things astrology and neuro-holistic therapy as well. Yes. A thing of being misunderstood. That's the thing, isn't it? How do we know if someone understands us? Is it that they can just repeat back what we said parrot fashion? Maybe. Is it by their look, their words, their manner? Possibly. I don't actually quite know how to assess whether or not someone understands something I've said, other than to get them to explain it back to me. And if they can explain it back to me where they've got a semblance of it, you know. Yeah, to how well do you know yourself? I think that there's a phrase, isn't there, that finding the self is like peeling away the layers of an onion, whereas really it's an infinite onion. And every time you think, I know myself now, no, there's more. And it's like that with other people too. You know, I know that I have a desire to be understood, which is why one of the reasons I'm making this video is that I wish to be understood. I wrote a song called I think it's called Blue Summer Sky. It's been a while since I've sung it, and it's about my autism. You know, the world around me is bright and loud. I only see where I place my eye. The earth spins and wobbles when I'm in a crowd. I'm enchanted by birds in the sky. And last summer, I wrote a blues song called Spectrum Child, which I haven't found the melody for yet, and so it hasn't become a song yet. But I want it to become one, because I think I could do something really cool with that. You know, I was watching a lot of blues stuff last summer, and I noticed that, you know, the word child appears a lot in blues lyrics. And so I thought, Spectrum Child. Ooh, something you can do with that. So, yeah. Now, before this goes on even longer than far too long, I think it'd be an idea for me to kind of finish this particular one. So, I have no idea if that's given you any insights into what my autism is like and what it's like for me being inside here. I think I've got a bit of echopraxia as well, because my neurology follows the neural physicality of other people around me. So if I'm in a theatre and someone's in front and they look up to the lighting, I look up, and I don't want to. I want to look at the stage. That happens in a car. If I'm just in the traffic and the car in front turns off and I don't want to turn off, I find myself turning off. And then I'm going down a road I don't want to go down because someone else did it. I don't eat meat. I mentioned I haven't eaten meat since 1991. But if I'm in a supermarket with my trolley and I'm following, and my brain's just registered the back of someone's jacket, if they turn off into the meat section, I find myself following them. It's very inconvenient. So whenever I book tickets to go and see things, I always try and be at the front so there's no one in my vision, so that I can actually see what's there. Because if there are people in front of me, I become dissociated from the event. It can be loud as anything, but I can't engage with it because someone's head's doing that in front of mine. Crazy, but there you go. Maybe it isn't crazy, but I understand it. It's a dissociation. If someone's in my vision, I become dissociated from whatever it is I'm experiencing. And because I'm dissociated, I can't engage with it. And I may as well not be there. You know, sometimes if I'm in a balcony situation, I'll video. And people say, why don't you watch the show instead of looking at a screen? I said, well, that's how I watch it. Because I've got a camera that's got a viewfinder and it's a good telephoto lens. So when I'm doing that, I'm actually focused right on the guitarist. I'm watching his hands. So not only am I listening to the solo, I'm actually following the scale and the notes he's playing. And I'm learning how to do it, right? It's like every gig I go to, it's like a guitar lesson, right? Because that's how we learn in the first place. So I love it, you know. And when I'm looking for a viewfinder, I can't see the people around me. I can't see someone fiddling with his jacket, or this one over here who spilt his beer, or whatever. The only thing that really does annoy me is the sound of people talking behind me. I think, because that pulls my attention back, you know. I want my attention to go that way to the stage, not behind me, where I end up paying more attention to whether or not Jackie saw Henrietta than what's actually happening in front of me. So it does bug me that we all pay for a ticket, you know, and then somebody in their own little bubbly world doesn't understand the impact they're having on the people around them. But there you go. That's what happens when you place yourself in a public arena. You must expect the public to behave in a public way because that's just life, you know. And out of the amount of concerts I go to, the amount of good ones far outweigh the number of spoiled ones. So that makes it worth it. Cinema's a different thing. Can't do that. I can only go to the cinema when I know it's the end of the run, it's the middle of the week, in the middle of the afternoon, the kids aren't out of school yet, and there's going to be no one in there. That's when I can go and see something. But to be in a packed cinema listening to crunch, slurp, no, couldn't do that at all. That would drive me absolutely potty. Yes, now I've been sitting talking for a while, and that means my nervous system has been slightly stimulated by the heat in the room, and the lighting is beginning to become rather impactful for me. So I need to go. I hope this has been informative. I'd love to know what you think of it. Yeah, just let me know. Okay. I don't know maybe I can't end it because there isn't an ending. But there might be a part two with more. If I have that kind of, oh, I should have said this, I should have said that, I'll make some notes and then maybe do a part two. Okay, take care, and thank you for your time and trouble in yeah, listening to me talk about this. It means a lot. Thank you. Bye.